So what exactly is the connection between our thoughts and tinnitus distress? And how does mindfulness help us work with this connection? You've probably noticed the connection if you've did the assignment I asked you to do last time, which was to write down moments of tinnitus distress, what your thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations were. If you go back and look at that, you will notice a definite connection between, say, certain thoughts and certain emotions. For example, you wake up in the morning and thinking, oh, how am I going to make it through another day like this? And this creates anxiety. Or perhaps midway through a day you think, if life is like this, enduring this all the time, what's the value? And you get depressed. Or going to bed at night, you wonder, how am I going to survive if I don't get a good night's sleep? And you start to get fearful. In all these cases, you can see a connection between what you're thinking and the distressful emotion that arises. And this connection between thought and emotion is not only applies to tinnitus. You can see it if you give you another situation, a non-tinnitus situation. So imagine that you're at a grocery store and you're in line and the cashier is ringing everything up, and you realize you've forgotten your wallet. You have no means to pay. You realize this, someone behind you offers to give you the money, lend you the money, and you are just, say, embarrassed at this point, and you get flustered and you just run out of the store. Now imagine another situation where someone else has that same experience, and when they're offered the money, the assistance, they think, wow, what a kind person this is. And they accept it and they move on. Right? It becomes, in the one case, a distressing experience driven by the thought, what an idiot I am to forget my money. It drives the thought of maybe self-hatred and the action of running out of the store, versus having the thought, what a kind person, I will pay it forward, and being relaxed and strolling out of the store. What we can see from that example is it's not a situation that brings about an emotional reaction, it's our thought about the situation. Because here we have two identical situations bringing about two different thoughts, and two identical situations driven by two different thoughts, bringing about two different emotional reactions and two different sets of consequences. So it's our thought and not the situation that drives our emotional reaction, including our reaction to tinnitus. Now this insight, or this idea about the connection between thought and our emotional reaction, goes back thousands of years actually to ancient Greek Stoicism, which I won't go into here, but it's an insight that has been picked up, was picked up by a theory, a system known as cognitive behavioral therapy, which was founded by Aaron Beck, a psychologist who actually just died not too long ago. Another co-founder name who's linked with cognitive behavior therapy is Albert Ellis. The idea is the same. It's our thoughts drive our emotions. So if we want to change our emotions, we have to change our thoughts. Now, cognitive behavior therapy has some wonderful insights. So let me throw another scenario at you to show you what one of the many ways in which this therapy is useful. This is an example used in many CBT, or cognitive behavior therapy is referred to as a shorthand. So imagine you're walking down the street and you see a friend and you shout out their name and they walk by and they ignore you. Now, you may start thinking, oh, I must have offended this person. They're ignoring me on purpose, and you start to feel really sad. Right? So this is, again, an emotion driven by a thought. In fact, perhaps they were just lost in thought and just didn't notice you. Right? So this is what cognitive behavior therapy wants to point out, is that we often have erroneous thoughts, fallacious thoughts. Not everything we think is true. And this insight is one we want to retain from cognitive behavior therapy, because it's just the case. Right? A lot of what we think is not true. And this is something that mindfulness takes over as well. Now, where mindfulness and CBT differ is what to do about the fact that we often have untrue thoughts that drive destructive emotions. CBT, which many of you may be familiar with, will advise us or encourage us to challenge a thought and then to replace it with another thought. So in the example of I just gave you about walking down the street, a CBT therapist might well tell you, well, are there other options that might explain the fact that your friend didn't notice you? And that maybe one of those options is they were lost in thought. Maybe they had, listening to something, or maybe something had happened to them and they just, were just lost in their own situation. And try to point out there are a number of different ways to interpret a situation and to pose an alternate thought that will then bring about a different emotion. And this is how, and some of you may have worked with CBT and tinnitus, how CBT works with tinnitus. So say you're having a thought that I won't be able, if I can't sleep tonight, I will just be worthless tomorrow and I'm going to harm my health. And this is a thought you have as you go to bed with rather loud sounding tinnitus. And it's that thought that's going to drive you to a distressing emotional state of, fear, panic, sadness. Could drive a lot of states, the thoughts that you're ruining your health. The CBT therapist will ask you to confront that thought. Is it the case that one night's sleep is going to undermine your health? Or in fact, we know that just lying in bed and resting, even without being able to fall asleep, is very restorative. We can go like this for long periods, stretches of time, without destroying our health. So recognizing that, they ask you to challenge the thought, which we've done, and then replace the thought with a competing thought, such as, if I don't get one night's sleep or even several nights' sleep, my health will be fine. I have endured this in the past and have gotten through it and can do it again. So there you've seen a thought challenged and replaced. And this is, in general, the strategy CBT takes to working with tinnitus. Now, mindfulness, as you may gather, takes a different strategy. Well, let me first talk about this CBT strategy and why, as a therapist, I think it's somewhat problematic and not all that successful. One is we're rather attached to our own thoughts, our own beliefs, and they are not easily pried away from us. In fact, I would venture to say I have yet met anyone who's been convinced of anything by a rational argument. Right? Reason is relatively ineffective, actually, in changing our belief structure. This is especially so when we can recognize that the thought did not get there rationally in the first place. Any of these problematic, disturbing, irrational thoughts, such as, if I don't get a good night's sleep, I'm going to destroy my health. That didn't get there by means of researching the evidence and coming to a sound conclusion. Instead, it got there by who knows what made you latch on to that belief? Perhaps something in your childhood. A lot of things can explain how we get irrational beliefs. It's not clear reasoning them is the best way to deal with them. Mindfulness takes a very different tact in dealing with thoughts in general. All thoughts, not just irrational thoughts that trouble us, but this is the process of observing them. So we accept from what's called classic CBT, which I've just been describing, or sometimes referred to as second wave CBT. We accept this insight that many of our thoughts are flawed, but mindfulness, which is a part of what's known as third wave CBT, says the best way to deal with all thoughts, especially troubling thoughts, is simply to observe them, to notice them. And if we notice them, we can just diffuse their ability to impact us. So if this is what we talked about with the watching the river, with the observing, if we notice a thought, it just will go its own way. Everything, grows, is born, it grows, flourishes, decays, and dies. Thoughts have a relatively limited lifespan if we don't feed them by buying into them. And so the role of mindfulness and the skill that you're developing in working with observing is this ability to observe a thought and not be carried away by it. And if we can just watch it, it will lose its impact. And that's really the goal of training the faculty of observing, is so thoughts, distressing, tinnitus thoughts, don't have the impact on us and we can let them go. So we say we can't stop the waves from coming. We can't stop the thought processes that are going to arise. We don't try to stop them in mindfulness because we think it's a pretty futile process, as I think you'll recognize if you've tried it for a while. So we can't stop the waves from coming, but we can learn to surf. And that's what we do in our mindfulness training, is learn to work with thoughts that arise, let them go their own way, and come back to our present everyday experience. And that's what we'll be working on in the practices this week and throughout the course.